Good evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and we've gone 3-0 for the first time in 16 years and looking to make it 4-0 for the first time in 27 years. But let's just enjoy the moment and take it 1 week at a time. We've got a full deck back on board with us tonight. Grapevine, good evening. Welcome back to the Demonland podcast.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening to all the Demonlanders too. Just enjoying the new weekly ritual post game, which is to watch Kozzy highlights over and over and over again. So I presume that's what the rest of you have been doing too.
I know, and there's more and more each week. It's something to behold. We'll talk about Kozzy hitting the scoreboard 4 times in a moment. But before that, also joining us tonight, long-time Demonlander George. Good evening, George.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, everybody. And we're not really getting ahead of ourselves here on Demonland. We still haven't beaten anyone above us on the ladder.
Exactly. Let's wait till we take a few scalps. Also joining us tonight, Bim Man. Good evening, Bim Man.
Good evening, George, Andy, and Grapevine, and all the Demonlanders. And I love Demonland. It's a microcosm of, I guess, footy fans. First time we've won 3 games at the start of a season since 2005, and there's still opportunities to complain about how we're travelling. It's a wonderful thing.
I've always said, and I've said it on the site a few times, it doesn't matter what happens, we can win the premiership and people are going to complain that the cup isn't shiny enough. There will always be something to complain about. And I myself are probably guilty of it and probably will be guilty of it tonight as we discuss the topics. But let's get straight into it. Let's talk the captain's performance. He's spending a lot of time on the ground, 90% this week. We're resting him in the forward line, and that height is really paying dividends. 24 possessions, 13 contested, 28 hitouts, 13 to advantage, 9 marks, 5 of which contested, 7 clearances, 9 score involvements, 2 goals and 2 behinds, which should have been 3 goals. It was a real dominant performance, and often when I listen back to our shows, we sort of skip over the skip, pardon the pun, because he almost always puts in a solid performance. But Sunday night, he really led by example, George. Maxi.
Yeah, fantastic performance again, as you said. Played 95% time on ground this week. You had a few other helpers out, as we pointed out last week, with half a dozen people sort of going over the 90% mark, which means that they're basically taking 1, maybe 2 breaks during the game. That just gives our mids much more time to get more breaks themselves, which is advantaging us. But I think the big change we notice it with Max, but he's able to do it this year because he's got this other chap called Luke Jackson, who also played 91% of the game. When Luke's doing the ruck and the work around it, it enables Max to just slowly slide up forward, and we've seen what he's capable of doing when he's left unattended up there. And boy, there's a lot of clubs going to really worry about this pair of ruckmen and the way they're operating at the moment, because not all of them have two capable ruckmen on the field, but we certainly have.
So I'll ask the other two, Grapevine and Bimman. Maybe Grapevine can take it first. It was great to have Max hit the scoreboard and provide that tall target, which is going to worry a lot of teams, like you said, George. Especially this week, because T-Mac had a very quiet night, wasn't really able to clunk any marks inside 50. But I just wonder whether how are we going to use Maxi and Jackson, and T-Mac and Weed and Brown when they come back, because I don't know if you've heard the news, but both T-Mac and Weed will be playing in the twos this week, and providing their form is good, they're going to be knocking on the door to the seniors. So how is our forward line? What's it going to look like, and what's the resting situation going to be? How many talls can we have? We can't have everyone in, so I guess form is going to play a big factor, obviously, but if T-Mac's firing, what are we going to do? Grapevine?
Andy, I've been worrying about this problem for weeks, thanks to my MFCSS, Melbourne Football Club Supporter Syndrome, for those of you not familiar with it. look, that's the issue. There's really an embarrassment of riches. There was a question mark over T-Mac's form coming into the season. Yes, he didn't have a great night on the weekend, but was double teamed for most of the night and was crowded out often. But look, Luke Jackson, I think we all expected him to be to develop and come on this year, but he certainly exceeded my expectations in the first few games. And as George pointed out, his form has enabled Max to just play a different role. And it's incredible that both of them are in the plus 90% game time. Look, to answer the question, I'm not sure that I do have an answer as to how we're going to set up when Brown and Wiedemann are back. Going on the weekend's performance, you'd probably say Tommy is probably first on the chopping block, you'd have to say. I don't know whether Weed will automatically get back in, but you'd think Brown, once he's had a run in the twos, will be right to go and will come back in. So very interesting to see how it's going to work going forward. But very pleased. Just one more thing. Very pleased that we've managed to go the 3 rounds. Had we kicked more accurately, we would have kicked very healthy scores each week. So it's been promising so far.
Yeah, I think we will go as in the 2 key forwards, whether it's T-Mac and Brown, T-Mac and Weed, T-Mac, Brown and Weed, a mixture of any of those two. But Bidman, I might go to you and George. I'll let you contribute after that. What's going to happen? What I was sort of is what we do with Max and Luke Jackson in terms of their resting and where do we put them? Because obviously we've been playing them forward to allow the midfielders more rotations. How's it going to work with the 2 ruckmen and their resting periods?
Just before we move off Max, because as you say, Andy, it's he's so consistently excellent for us that he's in that category. And funnily enough, I think track's sort of heading into that zone where you can forget how important he is to us. And he was just fantastic in this game. I mean, he's been brilliant all year. And, we talked about it on the podcast last year, should he be rested at different times last year? And he sort of refused almost, it appeared, to even countenance the idea of being rested. But he was awesome in that game yesterday. And it was really interesting, both him and Nat Nui having such dominant match-shaping games after the palaver about Grundy not having a million hit-outs to 1 and Pye still going down on the Thursday night or Friday night, whenever that was, because that was as dominant a game from a ruckman again as I can recall. And I've said this before, but he reminds me a lot of the way Teasdale played, that sort of strong around the ground, going back when needed, but also pushing forward. He probably gets a bit more forward than Teasdale ever did, and but he plays a very similar way, and he's remarkably good as below his knees and off the ground. And I thought it was a fantastic performance from him. As to the question of him and Jackson waxing together, I don't see it as really a huge issue, in large part because of how amazingly athletic Jackson is. Someone put up on Demonland some stats about him, and I think he was only 2nd or 3rd in contested ball in meter. He was high in meters gained. I think he was 2nd or 3rd or 4th behind Langdon in terms of distance travelled, 15 kilometres. Maybe he was our 2nd or 3rd.
He was up there on it was ground ball gets, where he was. I think he was equal with Jack Viney as the highest on the ground for ground ball gets, which is extraordinary.
Yeah, and so I think that he's really not going to be a forward. I think he's almost a half forward. I mean, I think he'll play at sort of almost a sort of floating forward and utility where he'll get up the ground a bit. And, what that means for someone like a Sparrow, whether you can still run that defensive forward. But he is so athletic that I think that they won't even consider him a big up there. He'll just be a matchup. Just a matchup nightmare for opposition coaches, because you'll have at least two talls. You'll have Brown and Wiedemann, for instance, and him almost playing a half forward. And he's put on a bit of size, and he can do serious minutes in the ruck, which gives us huge tactical flexibility in terms of how they use Max. And we'll talk about this a bit later, but they flooded pretty hard against us. The first team that's sort of done that we've played this in the games we've played thus far. And but him being able to go into the ruck meant that they were able to put Max forward, which was a really clever way to break that flood down and make sure the ball, if wasn't marked up forward, was brought to ground. But I thought they really had a good balance going on, the two of them. And on Jackson, I just think he's going to be a superstar. I mean, the focus is quite rightly on Kozzy, but Jackson he's something out of the box, and he's so good below his feet, and his ability to handball. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago, George. His footy IQ is super high. He's not like a basketballer first, footy player second. It doesn't look like that at all. And I think we've got something really special there.
George?
Yeah, I just had a question for everybody else. I was just wondering whether you think Tommy Mack's playing injured at the moment. He in the game, and again it's on. I saw it only on television. He seemed to be back to where he was last year, where he's not jumping off the ground and he's not accelerating. It's almost like he's going up and down in one spot. And I think that if that's the case, then it might make the decision in a couple of weeks' time a little bit easier.
Yeah, I haven't noticed anything, so the other guys can jump in if they did. But if that is the case, then there are two guys raring to go. We'll probably be knocking down the door very soon. So that's not too concerning for me at the moment. I'm just happy that we got through the first 3 weeks, and hopefully we can get through the next week before we need to sort of switch him out if the need is there. Other guys, you noticed anything?
Well, there's actually some interesting talk about his game on Demonland in terms of how it rated. I don't think he had a great game, and I dislike his body language at times when he gets beaten in a contest, or a umpiring decision goes against him, or he doesn't get one that he thinks he's deserved. But I mean, they did. The point was made, and it's a good one, was that the Giants made it pretty tough by getting players back in their defence and making it pretty hard for all our marking forwards. And I'm not sure, George, whether injured. If so, he would have had to have picked it up, and it probably suggests a chronic injury, because he was as mobile as he's been since 2018 in the first 2 rounds. So, unless he's picked up something. So I don't know about that. I definitely wouldn't even, countenance dropping him this week. He did his job, but I think he only had the one mark.
Well, we saw something that we haven't seen before, and that was not committing to a contest properly late in the game, which is very unusual for Tom McDonald. So, not sure.
Didn't look good, did it?
No. Look, it happens now and then. But not pretty out of character for Tom.
Yeah, and I thought actually on that, one good thing was that the commentators didn't bag him out, because there's quite rightfully a lot of focus on the dangers of concussion, and so you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't be alert to the dangers of concussion and then jump on a player who pulls out of a contest.
We'll move on. Langdon returned to some of his best 2020 form. He just owned that wing, taking 9 marks and using that speed and run and carry. He racked up an incredible game high, 903 metres gained. He propelled the ball inside 50, a game high 10 times, and had 5 score involvements. I just love Langdon. I think it's an absolute coup that we got him, and hopefully it's going to help us win finals, get into finals, win finals, and let's just take it 1 week at a time, George.
Yeah, fantastic, isn't he? And what a great pickup for us. And we had this a couple of years ago. We had this dramatic hole on the wing, and we have got the absolute perfect solution to it in the form of Langdon. He just keeps going and going. He's the ever-ready battery, isn't he? He just does not stop the whole game. I think it was interesting Max had an interview on RSN today where he said he plays on the far wing so that they can't actually get him off the ground. But it's nice to have a player who's willing to play the whole game, and the amount of ground that he covers, and more importantly for us, I don't think it's when he's got the ball in his hand. It's the options that he creates for our back line when they always know that there's an Ed Langdon out the side as a safety valve, So, he's a fabulous addition to the side, and will take us and has taken us a long way from where we were 2 years ago.
He always seems to be in the right spot defensively, as George said. He's either at the side or out the back of the contest, and sort of the safety valve there. So the numbers you read out, though, Andy, they speak for themselves. So there's not a lot to add to it. Some criticise him that his disposal could be a bit better, and that's probably the only knock on his game. Other than that, it's pretty much a complete performance.
Totally, and even with that, Grape, I reckon he's improved this year in terms of he seems with his disposal. I mean, he's making smart decisions. So he's doing what I know we'll talk about Hunt. He's doing what Hunt doesn't, and that he kicks long. He doesn't try many short kicks, and I think you hit the nail on the head with his positioning. He's just another smart footballer. He's clever. And he implies he seems like a pretty switched on fella too, from when I've heard him speak. And he applies that intelligence to the game. He makes smart decisions, and he's surprisingly good overhead. He took a beautiful mark pushing back into that young first gamer, or the medical sub, I think it was, for the Giants, and it was just he's really good hands. I saw that 904 metres. That's remarkable. 96 metres short of a kilometre running. And there's on the D's website, there's the stats that matter, and that's one. And they've got video of it, which is a new thing this year. And it's just him running and kicking for a couple of minutes. It's a great little package.
And that's the running of just when he's got the ball. You don't see all the running he probably does when he doesn't have the ball, running up and down that wing. So I don't have those stats in front of me. I'm not sure.
Well, it's 15 kilometres, I think he ran, and what's his name? 15 and a half. So topped our charts in terms of distance covered. As I was saying before, Jackson was not very far away at all from that.
He's not far off running a half marathon there. It's pretty amazing. Let's move on. Kozzy Pickett, he just keeps getting better and better. Kid is going to be an out-and-out star of the competition. He's already getting a lot of attention from the media, and rightly so. Kids are going to be lining up to sew that number 36 onto their Guernseys, which is a great thing for the club. He's incredibly exciting every time he touches the ball, and now he's impacting the scoreboard off his own boot for 4 goals, as well as being involved in 7 other score involvements. Grapevine, it's so good to have a live wire in the forward line.
He's magic, isn't he? And as you say, to have a whole new generation of Melbourne supporters with number 36 on the back. Plenty used to wear that one when Flash was around. Look, the great thing about Kozzy is that he's nailed a few of those early cracking goals. And so that just must give him the world of confidence that he can do absolutely anything on the footy field. So really pleased for him over the past couple of weeks. Freakish stuff, the kind of footy that brings in the crowds. And I was screaming his name on Sunday afternoon a couple of times. So, looking forward to watching that for the next 10 years.
Also his defensive stuff, just his tackling and harassing and, he's
He's
on
so quick as
on
well, isn't he? He's lightning
Yeah,
at top speed.
and aggressive. Like he plays aggressive footy, and I said that he appears to be a pretty coachable young man. And last year, you might remember, I noted he was. Seemed to go over the top a few times with his tackles, and he got pinged quite a few times. I don't reckon he's given away a free kick this year that I can recall. He might have, but he still tackles hard and pulls up. He hasn't given down, one of those late ones where it's down the ground, and he gave a couple of them away last year. He plays aggressive, as you say, Grape. He's quick. As we've talked about a number of times, he's got super high footy IQ. He's like there were the spectacular goals he kicked, but the one that just showed how clever he was the goal where the two, I think it's his last one, where he ran into the goal square. The two Giants players went up, and one player made the defenders no of deciding to punch the ball and not punching the ball over the line, and he waited down for that front and center. And he was onto it before, it was nowhere near hitting the ground when he caught it and grabbed it, and just sort of ran straight into the goal. It was just pure reading the situation. So many players before I've seen, who aren't quite as natural go into that contest, even going for the mark, and there's suddenly two Melbourne players, two Giant players, and no one down. I said, and I think it's been borne out, that he's in our top 5 most important players, and I stand by that. I think his performance is shown that, and he was part of what was another incredible statistic. Perhaps the most incredible statistic from this game was 17 inside 50 tackles. To there, I can't recall. I think there were only 6 or 7 for the Giants, and they were playing pretty tough footy as well. But 17 inside 50 must have made the coaching staff thrilled. I'm not sure how many he got, but predominantly him, Spargo, Nibbler, Swallow. That's just fantastic forward.
Swallow.
Sparrow. Good Lord. I'm just going to call.
Just calling Swallow.
Yeah, I'm just going to stay with Swallow. So.
Didn't you love, though, his other goal where he intercepted the kick in? And unlike other players, like you were saying, just the footy smarts, other players probably would have just gone for a punch to get it out of bounds. Well, he just did enough to get it to ground, and then that left-hand pickup followed by the right foot kick was just brilliant to watch. Just spectacular stuff. Yeah.
But the shot from behind the goal was the other really fantastic thing about that, because he was sweating on that. He was watching, and he waited until that ball was in the air and then moved to that contest. He saw the opportunity, which gave him the chance to pull it off. Because it's not, it's one thing doing that, but it was a premeditated thought in his mind, and they were clueless to what was happening. It was just fantastic. And one of the funniest things of that vision was Track looked like he was sort of half expecting a handball.
And then about halfway through, he just starts watching because he realises Kozzy's going alone. And he's just
no handball coming.
Yeah, he's a spectator. But the other thing about that goal is it came at a really important time of the game. It was just after half time, and it took us out to a 10-point lead, I think. And we didn't really look back after that point. I know that we'd been on top earlier in the game and had obviously got back into the contest, but it came at a really, really crucial time. And as you say, Bin Man, in terms of his importance to the team, and talking about Track, we've now got 2 genuine match winners who can
2 Showtime players.
Yeah, who can turn a game off their own boot in an instant, and you've got the capacity to basically swap them through the middle and forward. You'd probably have Track doing more midfield minutes and Kozzy spending more time forward, but swapping them and mixing things up will keep plenty of oppositions guessing as to what's going on.
There was a question on Demonland about whether, I think it was Lucifer's Hero talking about whether he might end up playing more minutes in the as a midfield, and I think you summed it up really well last week, George, in terms of he might play shock minutes as a shock trooper type, but he's just too important up forward. I think you just can't. That's robbing Peter and not getting much from Paul back on that, I reckon. So, he'll spend some time up the middle, but he gets up the ground too defensively, doesn't he? He's running up the ground, and he's just he's a star. And it's so when he kicked that goal, the noise that came up. There was only 6,000 or 7,000 people or 8,000 people at that ground, but there was a genuine buzz when he kicked that goal, and it's great to have a player who at the D's who opposition fans love as much as we do. Maybe not quite as much, but.
And just for accuracy's sake, this year he's had 3 free kicks against and 1 free kick for.
And Andy, despite his heroics and 2 brilliant goals again, he couldn't get the video of the week. You gave that to Max snapping from 40 metres out.
Yeah, I've that's on Demon Land. We have that feature on the front page, the goal, the video of the week, and I think he's been in the picture and the video the last 3 weeks. So I thought I better give it to someone else. And considering a sponsor, Max, I thought I'll give that because that was a great goal by Max. You don't often see him kick a snap for goal. So yeah, I thought that was pretty special.
Yeah, it went about 60 metres to that snap.
Yeah.
They're just picking it up outside the ground still.
Yeah, that was fantastic. All right. Well, we love Kozzy, and we could talk about him all night, but let's move on. I thought we'll talk about Jaden Hunt. This it might be a bit polarizing. Different people have different views. I thought he had a good game, with the caveat that his disposal efficiency in the first half at one point was at 30%. He's ended the match with 60% disposal efficiency. So he improved in that second half. He's had 5 turnovers. There's some other stats. He had 25 disposals, 6 intercept possessions, 540 metres gained, 7 inside 50s, 3 tackles. He provides that good, run and speed out of defence. I'd like to see more of the second half Jaden Hunt, and hopefully his disposal can improve. But we've talked in the past, whether you can improve disposal this late in the game. Bin Man, you want to start off with him?
Yeah, look, I mean, I said before the season started that, I think he's his KPI is meters gained, gets the ball, carries it, kicks long. I would flat out just tell him he can only kick at 50. I think I've said this before, I have, but kick at 50 metres or handball it off. He's just hopeless at kicking those, particularly when he's on the move and running 20, 30 metres. Those little chip kicks, he just doesn't seem to have that capacity to weight them or not float them above the or over the Demons player's head. I think I was trying to think of his role, and I really reckon his pace is critical for that back half. His disposal is such a worry that it's it creates problems, and there's no question about that. But that zone that I was talking about, that cell-like zone that moves across the ground, is like almost an amoeba as opposed to in the straight lines. The way around it is crossing it, and that you need players with genuine speed to be able to get across to players, both to stop them crossing it, so the option in the corridor or around it isn't there, and to man up and to get the speed enough to go out and stop players running on to get the player on the mark. And so I really think that's his ace in the pack is his foot speed, and meters gained are a bonus on top of that. And I think it's hard to know, like we've talked about any number of times, the role that players have without it being explicitly pointed out by the coach. But I reckon his leg speed is really, really important for us back there. And if he can run and carry, all the better.
George, I believe you hold a slightly contrary view to most about this. You want to?
Yeah, I'm actually probably in the same boat as Binman, if the truth be known. Everybody looks at Hunt and they all get very impressed with the runs up the ground. It's the effect that it has on the rest of the players and the way it's delivered, I think, are just as equally as important. There was a fabulous article a couple of days ago in The Age from Michael Gleeson, and it was about how Sydney beat Richmond's zone defence. And the whole thesis behind it was, instead of kicking into the 50 where the defenders have time to set up that zone and come off their own man to intercept, the idea was to actually hang back a little bit and then wait for the zone to spread. If you've got lots of options, and Sydney what Sydney were doing was kicking it around the 50, changing up the angles all the time so that the defenders were spread throughout the whole 50. Now, the danger with Jaden Hunt when he runs down the ground is that the defenders just walk straight back into the 50. They fold back. It's the natural thing they do. And the contrast is, if Salem's got the ball, he's kicking it to someone who's 20, 30 metres away. The defenders have to come out to that player to defend that player. But with Jaden Hunt, all they do is fold back, wait for the ball to go up in the air, then they come off their man to intercept. So he's, like Binman said, he's got to change that game up. He should be told by the coaches, do not kick at 50 unless you kicking for goal. You should be kicking 20 or 30 and making sure, or handballing the ball to get the maximum effect for what you're doing. But unfortunately, it looks fantastic for the spectator's point of view when he runs up the ground, but he's actually probably not doing us a lot of favours in the end.
Great, Finey. Anything to add?
No, look, for me, the question certainly for the past year, and as you mentioned, sort of going a little bit back to his 2017 form, is why can't he be doing what Langdon does on the other wing? In addition to looking similar, they're both quick. You'd sort of think, why can't he be sort of playing that same role? So, I'm also not convinced that he's cemented his place in the team yet, even though he had a pretty good game in the end on Sunday night.
Yeah, I think that. I mean, George, I'd be saying that I'm not sure if maybe I wasn't clear, but I'd be advising him if I was a coach to run and carry to the middle of the ground if he can, if he can get into open space and got the ball, and kick it as long as he can, get it deep into our line and into our forward line, not kick those 20-metre kicks, because that's where he's turning him over. I take your point. I think that's a really good one about that. Then that creates a rebound opportunity, and it means that the defenders can all sort of sit back and they're not stretching out that defence. I think that's a really interesting point. But if he gets the ball at 50, sort of at the halfback, and can run to the centre and launch at 60 metres, it's going pretty deep into our forward line. And he's only getting 8-9 kicks a game, so I'd just be directing him to do that, or handball it off to a Salem, or get it to the player running next to him, because he just cannot hit that 20-metre kick. He turns it over every time, and then you're right as well, because he turns over there, he's in the middle of the ground, everyone's out of position. That's the other thing that those runs do. As you say, they look spectacular, but it drags everyone with him, because the way they run in waves. And there's a great photo of him and Langdon and Kozzy all running together. Well, you've got to, because you've got to look for that overlap hand pass. You turn it over, you've got 3-4 players who are run ahead of the ball and no one to get back, and that's where you cough up goals. And we did cough up goals to the Giants on the rebound.
Engorged Onion in the chat room has said that Hunt is a more aesthetically pleasing version of Frost. And boy, I watched a bit of watched much about it, but I watched a bit of the Hawthorn Geelong game, and boy, I'm glad Frost doesn't play for the D's
Did you watch
anymore,
the end of that
because
game? Frost was somewhat important towards the end of the game. So a lot of Frost ball.
Yeah,
yes, certainly.
I love the mark that Frost took in the defensive goal square on top of the Geelong player, and then properly handballed it to someone 3 metres away.
The thing is, he handballed before his feet were even back on the ground. It was just that was quintessential Sam Frost, wasn't it?
It was fabulous.
But it's actually not a bad comparison and makes your point actually quite well, George, in the sense that, as in Gorjanjin's saying, is that sort of randomness of what Hunt can do, it's like, well, how do you structure up around that? Like, what do you do? You're half thinking, I mean, going at 30%, you're sort of half thinking there's a pretty good chance, 70% chance it's going to come back the other way. So, but I do think that speed across the ground to man up, to cover the exit, to stop the transition is super important.
Yeah, I totally agree there. I should have prefaced all this by saying, look, he's definitely an upgrade on what Joel Smith was offering us last year, and that defensive side to be able to cover the opposition switch is absolutely critical these days. It just shuts everybody down the way that football's been played for the last couple of years.
And the most important thing for him, I think, is don't use the man bun. Just stay with the flat box. I think that's the key.
Yeah.
All right, Bin Man with the fashion tips. We'll move on now. Have GWS provided the blueprint on how to take Oliver out of the game? De Boer was holding and pushing and scraggling and getting all up in Oliver's face for the whole first half, or at least while he was on the ground uninjured. That hard tag totally put Clarry off his game and rendered him completely ineffectual in the middle. The D's, we were forced to play him forward, where he was able to get into a position to make an impact on the scoreboard, but alas, his accuracy in front of the big sticks was absolutely horrendous. He's kicked 2 points. I think he missed the other completely. What do we, Great Viney? What do you do when Clarry's getting tagged out of the games, and I can bet you a lot of other clubs are going to try and do that? Is there some way we can negate that and be able to get him in the game without having to take him out of the middle?
I like what they did, that he just went away from the ruck contest altogether and took his man completely away from it. That was quite an innovative way to deal with it. But look, as you say, if he'd converted the shots on goals, it wouldn't really be an issue. And we've seen before that he can go forward and be damaging. So, look, I'm not too fussed. It's not the first time he's had a tag put on him, and it won't be the last. And I'd be backing him to beat it most times. So, not fussed here.
Bin Man, any tactics that you can see to be able to sort of get around that, perhaps?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because there was a couple of things. One, I don't think he did handle it super well, but again, it's hard when you're not at the ground. But some of the tactics by De Boer were like, he was all over him, scrapping him. I mean, that frustrates me. I mean, I don't mind tag, go for it, but you can't be illegally grappling all the time. In that, I listened, George, to that interview with Max this morning on RSN. That's a really good. I think it's every fortnight, the captain's run or something they call it, and it was like a 25-minute interview with Max, and he talked about exactly what Grapevine had just said, that Clarry moved the ball completely away from the bounce, which created a 2-on-1 and was a big factor in some of our clearances that we got. And I think the one where we got maybe it was the one Fritsch got that was created space, although he ended up being involved, but he was way away from the centre bounce. So, it was a real shame he missed those goals. He didn't look confident on them. But the other thing from a tactical perspective is, sure, you tag him out of the game, but I think that's why it's not used in the same way as it once was, because it also takes one of their players out of the game. And so, like, it's a 0-all. I mean, sure, he's a better player than De Boer, but, it means that you're essentially saying one of our footballers, we're down to 21 men on the hope that we completely nullify Oliver. I would have moved him probably away from the centre earlier, perhaps. I don't know. I mean, he seemed to play all right up forward. I just don't think many coaches will use it, because sure, you tag him out of it, but then Track can come in and dominate, and Viney can dominate. And Viney was terrific. I know we'll touch on him, and and maybe he was better because of De Boer blanketing Oliver.
Yeah, I think that's really critical, Ben, man. It'll depend on the individual opposition coach and what he's got available. You take a De Boer out of the middle, you've got to put someone else in there. And if you haven't got that quality player available, then there really is no point in using a tag. We'll probably see it next week used heavily. O'Connor from Geelong did the same job on Mitchell from Hawthorn in a big way. I think Mitchell had 3 possessions to half time or something like that. But the commentators, despite the fact that they were horrible for the rest of the game, did make the point that Clarry's a superstar of a player. He's got to learn to overcome this. He's going to get that sort of attention. So the options are you've got to overcome it and just get better than the tagger, or you move like we did. We're able to move him up forward, which enabled us because we have the remaining talent. We've still got the Vineys, we've still got a Brayshaw, we've still got a Jones that we can throw in there who can still get the ball. So it's going to be difficult for the opposition coaches to get the same effects out of tagging Oliver that you'll get from, say, another side with only 1 or 2 major midfielders, Hawthorn being a good example.
Exactly.
Take Mitchell out and you've taken Hawthorn out effectively. O'Meara and Warple aren't the same sort of levels. So,
and Gordon was asked about that as well, and about his response, whether the inference was that he was thrown off his game by De Boer's tactics, and Gordon said that he didn't think so. In fact, that there's previously he sort of reacted much more poorly to being tagged hard like that, and that he was really positive at the quarter time breaks and the half-time, three-quarter time, and that he'd actually sort of given them a chop out in terms of staying on the ground. And so I checked his time on ground, and he was 89%. So I thought, well, I wonder if that's sort of what his normally is. And I checked the previous week, and it was the same last week. So, he must stay on the ground a fair bit. And then sort of players like Nibbler and Sparrow and Viney are around the 60s, mid-60s and low 70s. So, he stayed out there and worked hard and, sounded like he was really positive to the rest of the players. So it didn't seem to upset him.
If you want to hear that interview with Max Gawn, it is on Demonland. So check out the Max Gawn interviewed on RSN thread on Demonland. You mentioned Viney, B-Man. We had Demonland poster Cards 13 posed a question to us. He said, interested to hear your thoughts on Viney. I, for one, am happy to put my hand up and say I was okay with him being traded last off-season. That's Cards 13, not myself. Lol. What would I know? I thought his game on the weekend was really underrated. His attack on the contest at times, especially when the Giants had some run-ons, were really important. Once he's fully match fit, he can really add another different option in the middle and another fear factor for the opposing ball carrier. B-Man, you want to talk about Viney?
Yeah, well, it sort of mirrors my thoughts. I think I said a few weeks ago that, maybe I was preparing myself for the sort of likelihood or the chance of him leaving and downplaying his role. But, and I think I've mentioned also the book I read around the captain's class about looking at leadership skills and the sort of the qualities of leaders and their influence on great teams has really influenced, actually, funnily enough, my view on Viney. And one of them is that the great leaders do things on the field that stand out physically, and that almost always the great leaders aren't the best players, and that it's their sort of preparedness to go above and beyond, both in the training environment and on the field physically, and pushing themselves past the boundary, and they're sort of myopic focus on the game and winning and their teammates. And I reckon he's got a lot of those qualities. And I'm totally with Cards 13 on that, and think he's a super important player. And I've come around to that view that I think he's a lot more important than I gave him credit for, both from a cultural perspective, but also, in terms of the role he plays. He was terrific in that game. I think he had his score involvements were quite high, George. Greg Viney, did you see the stats on that?
No.
Yep. I'll look that up while you guys are chatting.
Yeah, I don't know about the statistics, but I think what we're seeing with Viney this season, although it's only 2 games, is exactly what we're seeing with Brayshaw and Jones and even Hunt that we were talking about. It's all about playing a role. Previously, Viney was a mid, and a mid, and that was all he did. Now we're starting to see him playing that out of the centre role, up forward, a little bit of half forward, half back coming off the back of the square type of thing. So we're adding strings to the bow, and when needed, you throw him into the middle. And again, it's going to be a horrific prospect for opposition coaches when we can afford to play Viney outside the square because we've got Oliver and Petraka and a Pickett and a few others that we can throw in there at any time. But I think Jack will actually improve as a player, and his output for the side will become much greater than what it has been in previous years.
Yeah.
Viney, Jones, Brayshaw all had 7 score involvements, and I think you can add Nathan Jones to that sort of outside the centre square effectiveness because I think he's been sort of playing well.
And Andy, just looking, he had 26 pressure acts, 8 tackles, 8 clearances, and 7 loose ball gets. So that sort of all sort of numbers that go to the point that George was just making about, sure, you take Oliver out of the equation, great. Then you've got someone like Viney who can rack up those sorts of numbers, and you can't throw a second tagger at them, can you?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. I think we've answered that one. Accuracy or lack thereof, once again, was an issue. We had multiple players miss very easy shots, set shots on goal. We miss out on the banking of percentage when other teams in the competition are able to put teams to the sword. Look, this hasn't affected the outcome of any of our games yet, except in terms of, and this is just from my own greedy perspective, because I want to thrash teams. I want to bank percentage. We know how important that can be. We've missed finals as a result of small percentage margins, but as I said last week, if you keep winning, it's not a problem. But want to start putting teams to the sword, putting teams away, and the set shot accuracy has really got to improve. I don't think I'm alone in thinking that.
130% is not a bad way to start
No.
the season, though. And look, 180 is better, but look, I'd rather have the off days and win and get them right on those crucial close games. So hopefully the accuracy will come to the fore when we need it most. The only one really concerning for me in an ongoing sense is Fritsch, even though he actually kicked pretty well the other night. So, but yeah, it's just him being able to nail those shots from sort of 40 out, 45-degree angles. So, yeah.
But
I think he took 3 from 3 at one stage. Go ahead,
it's amazing the difference accuracy made because he kicked 3 from 3. One, and the first one from the boundary line was like an arrow, went straight through from on his left foot on the on the left side pocket, so on the wrong side nominally for a lefty. But it's incredible the difference accuracy because he didn't really have much involvement in the game, but he had 3 goals, so. It papers over a lot of things, kicking 3 straight goals, that's for sure.
Although we won all those games, in each of them at points where we're behind, or certainly gave the opposition the opportunity to come back. And that's the other downside of the lack of accuracy is that we're opening the door for other sides, and certainly the better sides will take full advantage of that. So hopefully this can be alleviated over the coming weeks before we get into the serious parts of the season.
The one thing I would say about the accuracy, though, is that we in 2000, I think 19 and parts of 18, we worked really hard to get the ball into the centre corridor. Our accuracy was better because we were kicking from the centre corridor. But if you look where our scoring shots are from, and Fritsch is a good example, is that our leading lanes are often to the pocket, and they're marking on the boundary line, and they're taking shots from there. The ones that really, that frustrated the goals, like the ones that Oliver missed, or two of them at least. You've got to put them through. The best players put the ones dead in front through.
And look, I will say it is great that we are having plenty of scoring opportunities. That's not a problem. We're not having the issues of getting it in there, taking marks, and getting the shots. So it's not like we're starved of opportunities to score, which is a good thing. And I guess the kicking will kicking straight will sort itself
It's
out.
interesting.
Hopefully,
I watched the Hawthorn Geelong game, and anyone who watched that would have felt the frustration of being a Melbourne supporter for the past 2 years and just getting it in and getting it in and getting it in and not being able to put a score on the board.
And it's interesting, Grapevine, in terms of the context of this game, because our scoring to inside 50 ratio has been just fantastic in the first two rounds, and it was not too bad again this week. I think it was 45%, which was what was unusual about this game in terms of this season for us, is that the Giants flooded back super hard, and that's why they ran out of gas. I mean, there's way too much emphasis on the fact that their injuries, how costly they were. They were part of their inability to score was because really their only option was to score on the rebound, because they pushed back hard. That the defensive, our forward line was completely flagged
yeah.
up. So I thought we did fantastic actually to score as much as we did in that context. We got to 100 points, didn't we? In 2019, when the full length quarters, we were struggling to score 60 points. So I thought that was much underappreciated in terms of how much defensive flooding the Giants did, and you can see why they did it. I totally knew that they, would be something they'd look to do, because they had to win that game. And so that's what I think, partly about this attacking football is, once you start losing games, you'll have coaches who won't be playing so attacking. They can't afford to lose another one, and Cameron couldn't. So what do? You flood back and try to make it a defensive struggle. I reckon we did fantastic to score what we did.
We'll talk about those injuries to GWS. They were well on top of us early. They'd got I think out three goals to one very early on. They had the lead before three players went down with injury, sort of before half time. Did we dodge a bullet with those injuries? Had those players, look, it's a moot point because we don't know, but had those players remained on the ground, I don't know. Do you think we would have come back? Would we have steadied the ship?
Short answer for me is yes, and it's sort of a little bit, chicken the egg thing. It's a bit frustrating because that's again led partly by the commentary team. I think it really undersells our performance. Like they were talking about, we should run over the top of them. Keep in mind they're fit athletes. Yes, the rotations had gone down, but they weren't. It wasn't like they had three players down on the bench for the whole game. They had the medical sub that came in for Davis at the end of the first quarter. So then Coniglio was out, and De Boer wasn't until the third quarter. So really, they were down two players for not even 50% of the game. And De Boer wasn't doing anything. He was just bloody tagging. So I think it's, there's a risk of underselling our performance based on that injury. So no, I don't think it was a factor that many people are suggesting it was.
Anyone else want to?
Yeah,
disagree.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think the other effect of the injury is not only that you lose the player, but you can't actually continue with your rotations. I think the commentators said at one point they had 4 GWS players come to the bench and they had to send them away because they just didn't have anyone on the bench to come on. So it is right. You're right about the cumulative effects on the team, but when a team is also running heavily and trying to stack the defensive lines. There's an awful lot of running gets involved in it when it's locked in the opposite end of the ground. So you're on a hiding to nothing when you can't get players on and off the field, and they're having to run huge distances in the game just to try and hold it all together. But we were playing. We had the game pretty well sewn up. Although the scoreboard came back later towards the end, but we had the game in control well and truly at halftime. I thought, even though there wasn't all that much difference in the scorelines.
Yeah, well, I put in the game day thread, so it was there for future reference that would win that game by 6 goals, and I was very disappointed that it ended up being 34, I think. But
No,
yeah,
accuracy.
That's right. It's I mean, yeah. So of course injuries were a factor in my thinking with that, but I just think there's a risk of underselling our performance based on it.
MF-C in the chat room, it says, keen to hear your guys' thoughts on Gus and his role on the wing so far this year. George, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mentioned it before. I think Gus is playing this role play that we're seeing with a couple of players. It's also easy to remember that. Sorry, it's easy to forget that Gus really didn't have a great pre-season after his foot injury towards the end of last season. So he's had to build up to the necessary levels to get into the side for a start, and because he's been out of it pre-season wise as well, he probably hasn't had the preparation that he's needed. So the wing role, we've known there's been a deficiency and a need in that area for some time now, and his role is not so much to go get the ball, which he's been brought up to be in his career to this stage. He's that outlet that we need when the ball goes out. When the ball is gotten in the middle, he's the one who's he's the go-to man on the outside. And if the ball does go out towards his wing, he's almost an additional mid as well because of that experience that he's got as a ball getter. So like Viney and like Cunt and like Jones, even I think there's been changes in the way A and B's been used, the way Spargo's being used. It becomes role play. You've got a role to do during the game. You do your role, and if everybody does their role, we'll win the game. And you might have to sacrifice a little bit of your own game and what your own preferences might be. But at the end of the day, we've won another game, and I think that'll continue for Gus as well. We'll see a different side to Gus than what we've become used to as supporters.
Hey man, anything more to add on that?
Yeah, I think that they'll keep him there now. That's his position. It's a tricky position to play because you can get stuck on a wing and have to do the running up and down the ground and not get the footy. So you've got to mentally prepare that. We're probably 80% of the time we're going to play through Langdon. You'd think the opposition are going to probably try and avoid Langdon. I'm guessing. So, it is it's become a specialist role in the way it was when you had Robbie Flower and Greg and Wood back in the day in terms of a specialised position. And I think that's his position. We've just got too many inside mid, so he's not going back there. If he wants to play footy for us, I reckon that the position they've got him in mind for is the wing, and they'll want him to, as George so accurately says, so it's a role that he needs to practice at. The only way to do that is to keep him in it. I actually thought he was really important in the first quarter and in the last quarter. In the first quarter, I thought he defensively was. He worked hard, but also was disrupted. A lot of their entries. I thought he was terrific. And in the last quarter, when they pushed, he was playing quite deep. I know he was still on the wing, obviously, but he was, deep in their defensive zone, tackling and being involved. So it was one of the better games defensively I can recall him playing, and it's really been a sort of a fair knock on him that he hasn't been defensively strong. So it seems to me he's got his head in the right place, and he's accepting the job that he's been given, and he was important.
He didn't leave anything out on the field. I think just towards the end, the ball didn't quite go out of bounds on the wing.
He
He was
had
trying to
enough.
will it just to go out. I think he was just cooked at the time. He'd been running a lot, so yeah, fair enough. 3 wins against 3 teams currently in the bottom 5. You can only beat the opposition that is put out in front of you, and we've done that. We've got the job done. But they have been injury-riddled teams, and despite, we've beaten all 3, we haven't put any of those teams away. Other teams have put those same teams away. Maybe that's the accuracy. Should we rein in our excitement levels a bit and wait and see how we perform against better opposition, which we've got coming up this week? Grapeviney?
Well, those teams are only on the bottom because we've beaten them. They could all be. They could be in the top 3 had it not been for the D's. So,
Yeah.
look, as you say, you can only beat who you've played. So, I'm quite confident going into this week. I think Geelong are overrated and haven't shown too much this season yet, and I don't expect that to change. So, yeah, perhaps when we face Richmond in a few weeks' time, we'll know a bit more.
I think we might have to wait till Sydney. They're the informed team.
They're playing very well,
well,
Sydney, what I've seen of them.
Big man, before we move off the game, was there anything you wanted to talk about tactics-wise?
There were a couple of things in terms of that discussion about clearances were interesting because we were down clearances at one point and up in the game. I thought it was really interesting tactically in terms of, as I said, as sort of a team that went back to a 2020 style flood. Their goals were on the rebound. I thought early on we didn't quite have our defensive structure right, and it really showed what we were talking about last week, how critical our intercept roles have been this season structurally in terms of our tactic, our sort of setup, because neither May or Lever had a great first half, did they? And weren't holding their marks, and it really hurt us in terms of our ability to. We gave up at least a couple of those goals early on. Were due to drop marks. One from Lever, who turned it around, I was surprised he got 22 possessions and got a coach's vote as well. So I presume that. I don't know, actually. It was a Goody or Cameron who gave him that. But, I think that one of the things that was asked to Gorn about, what's the maturity? He mentioned maturity a lot. And I think that we've got a system, as George pointed out, we've got a system now that is repeatable, that, yes, they push, but I didn't feel concerned really that they were going to roll back over the top of us, and part of that's a confidence in that structural, that defensive zone, and players knowing their role, and that that's the critical thing, is that sort of people the players are buying into a system. So I thought it was a really good victory. I reckon that's exactly as Grapevine says, that sort of. Should we downplay the role of the wins? No way should we do that, because they would be much higher up the ladder. Obviously, 4 points if we hadn't have beaten them. And I think that, as I said, 3 weeks ago, we've got one more game in this stretch of opening 4 games. All 3 of the teams, and Fremantle would like to think they're pushing for the 8, but the other 3 teams were definitely starting the season thinking we want to make 8. Giants are in a bit of a mess, to be honest. So, and those injuries aren't going to help. But 100%, Saints are thinking top 8, and Geelong will be. So, this season, these first 4 games are huge for how this season plays out for us. As much as anything, they're 8-point games. We beat them, and that we're 4 points up on our direct rivals. And so I think it's from that perspective, it's a terrific start. But most of all, from a tactic perspective, defensively they're super hard to score against, and their system is very well drilled. And finally, Goodwin's, who identifiable. That whole mantra he's been talking about for years is having a Melbourne identifiable brand. Well, the fans can see it now, and that's a game based on a really strong defensive unit that knows what they're doing, that zones up super well, was really hard to score against, and that has got some other sort of notable aspects like our pressure up forward. Spargo, Nibbler, and Kozzy, 17 tackles inside 50 is just phenomenal, really. If you compare to what we were getting in times of 2019 and 2020, we weren't getting to double figures ever, basically. So, I think the other thing I would just say finally, Andy, about the tactics stuff is Goody has long been criticised for being sort of perhaps tactically a bit slow. I just think that he needs to get some credit for where we're at and how they're using the players and how the team's travelling in that space.
All right, we've got a caller on the line. Good evening. Welcome to the Demonland podcast. Who am I talking to?
It's time.
It's time. How you doing?
Good. Really enjoying the chat tonight. Fantastic stuff. Really enjoying the discussion around the tactics and the game plan. And just wanted to add two observations and get your guys' view on that. And that is, I was lucky to get to a couple of games last year up in Sydney. And one thing when you're at the games that I really noticed that the top teams tend to do is they're set up off the ball. And I felt, looking at Melbourne in the last couple of years, we just don't have that intelligence around where you set up, where you stand off the ball. And part of that's around not so much zoning even, but just knowing where to stand, where that next kick is going to be. And particularly around when there's contests and you get someone hacking a kick out of a contest, you'll see the teams like, Geelong and Richmond quite often end up having players that mark those hacked kicks because those players know where to go to, have been coached where to go to. And I always thought that was something that was really missing. And I really was a bit despondent about where that was going to, where that training was going to come from, because it hasn't really come up until this year. But I must say this year, from what I've seen, I was lucky enough to go to the Saints game and just seeing the way they're setting up now off the ball, and it's all over the ground. So I think it manifests itself in being able to get – it's part of what you were just saying about the setup in the back line, but that's also because they're setting up well off the back line, behind the ball, so that when the ball comes forward, they're already in a position. I think it's really helped in cutting down teams when they get a run on, that we've been able to reform and stop those run-ons like we did against St Kilda and against GWS, because we have that structure off the ball. And it also creates options going forward as well that we didn't used to have, because they're getting players more into positions off the ball. That's just one observation. The other thing I wanted to just add was I think that Tomlinson's very underrated in his role now. And I think that, a lot of what we're seeing this year, and that you were just mentioning about how much we're attacking off the back line, is really coming in a big way from Tomlinson, because he's now being able to play as a stay-at-home key defender, which is allowing Lever to have a bit of a breakout year, really back into the role that we recruited him for. Whereas the last couple of years he's been forced into being a second key defender. Now he's been able to be an interceptor. It's also released May, I think, to run forward and create those attacks as well. And I think being able to have the luxury of have both those players being able to attack has made a really big difference. And the other comment I just wanted to make was I really feel that in watching the top teams over the last few years, the top 4 or 6 teams tend to, I think, have a difference in their skill level to everybody else, and it's a point of difference. And I think that it's starting to stand out a bit. I think Jordan's a fantastic input into the midfield. I think that he's doing great work there, and it's really starting to add decision making and skill that we needed. It's starting to be a point of difference. And I think, you talked about Hunt before. I think, he's got the opportunity, he's been given a go, but he needs to fix his skill, or Bowie is going to, you could see Bowie coming in and providing that skill. And A and B is going to be a weapon. They're both going to be weapons, but not if they they're not going to be accurate. Just was wondering about your guys' feedback on that.
There's a lot to unpack there. Big man, you wanna take any of that?
Yeah, I think some really excellent points there. I totally agree with the setup, and just as an asterisk, you watch Uze will get credit for that, and Goody will get none. But I think you're right. We're definitely setting up well around, not just at the centre square, right around the ground. I think the big factor in that, we've talked about it in terms of that discussion that we've had over the last few weeks around clearances, is that we're prepared to not win as many clearances, to set up offensively and defensively really well. So if we do lose it, we're rebounding off the halfback flank. But when we do win it, we get the sort of goal that we got at the beginning of the third quarter when it kicked out to Fritter, and Fritter got that goal. If you think we've already got, 7 or 8 of those goals already this season, maybe 6 or 7 of those goals that have come straight out of the centre square. Even with Max's dominance, we weren't getting them in 2018, 2019. Even in 2018, we're not getting many goals that way at all. And I think big factor in is that they've got one contested ball winner going at the contest, not 2 or 3. Even casual observers of Melbourne over the last few years have sort of derided us for the, multiple players at the, bees at the honeypot type thing. So I think that's a really astute observation, and it's definitely something we've improved in. I agree on Jordan. Jordan's so much better player than I had expected him to be. I think I said it a couple of weeks ago. I had it in my mind that he was a sort of another inside mid, but he's not been played like that. He's getting most of his possessions uncontested as an outlier. So, I think that.
Well, I did read somewhere an interview with one of his junior coaches saying that they didn't understand after he was drafted why everybody was saying that about him, because he played a lot of his junior football as an outside mid. So it's an interesting observation that he's doing some of both, but more so outside. I think the St Kilda game, he had 2 contested possessions and 18 uncontested.
Yeah.
So certainly showed, that's the role.
Yeah, and they've got a really good balance across the team. And I think Taylor's done a great job bringing in some X factor as well.
I think it's time, as pointed out, some really good points that are becoming obvious to us right now. I remember in another post in Demonland, there are a couple of statistics. We love statistics here. We're now number 1 for intercepts
By a long way.
and we've come by a long way, and we've come from number 14 last year, I think, and that's to do with the setup that we've got in the back line. I think it was an interview from Lever a couple of weeks ago where he said, or it might have been Stephen May, where he said they actually hadn't played too many games together because of injury or suspensions, and now that they've actually got a few games under their belt, they know where everybody is expected to go and where your mates are actually going. It's just that confidence of playing together. But you're absolutely right as well. Tomlinson has filled that role as a third reliable down there who just keeps getting better and better. We've found a fantastic role for him, and of course we always forget about Salem, who's there every week. So having a back line that's consistent adds a big factor, and that's why the intercepts has gone from down the bottom of the ladder effectively to right at the top. You look at Richmond in their premiership years, and that was built around the Grimes and the Vlastons and the McIntoshes, and Aspreys, all these rather ordinary type of players, but they just play the game every single week and do their role every week. And we've got a great group down the back now, and it's just a fantastic change to the whole team. But you're right as well, around the middle. Completely different way of playing the middle. We were always caught on the outside in the last couple of years. Even the Footscray practice match showed us that again, when we really only had one person in the middle because of the rest of the midfielders weren't there. But Footscray do it so well, getting the ball to those outside users like McRae and even Bontempelli, and they really damage you in a game. But you've got to set up properly in the first place. So dramatic change from what we've been doing in past years.
And it's great, Viney mentioned that.
mentioning that great movement at the Bulldogs, it really excites me about Bowie, watching Daniel and how significant he is in their ball movement, how much of it he launches, and that we're crying out for that, and it's going to be there. You can see, the Jason Taylor magic's been in just bit by bit filling in the holes. You start to look at what you might perceive as the weaknesses at the moment in maybe aging players or players that don't have the skill, and you just see those weaknesses are being brought in. They're obviously being seen and being addressed. That's exciting.
Certainly is. Anything else you want to add? It's time.
No, I think that's about it. That's about it. Just in terms of those players, I think it's just that I think that we haven't been at the level skill-wise of the top 4 to 6. I was concerned about getting to that bracket, but you can see Kozzy brings not just that X factor, but his skill at just kicking a ball even from the back line and hitting a target is something we've been desperate for. Obviously, we've had Salem and he's been fantastic, and May's just so elite with the kicking out from the back line, and you can see that our skill level through the ground is progressively building, and I think that's going to start to put us towards, what I feel that I've seen in the first 3 weeks is that we've actually got a system, and they're starting to execute that system, and we can start, as you just mentioned before, we can start to see what that is that Goody's talking about, but we can actually see a system. Some of the execution of it's been a bit rough, because there's some skill missing. But I think, you can see where the skilled players are going to come in the next year or so. And it's, all of a sudden from feeling very pessimistic at the end of last year, there's all of a sudden a whole lot of reasons for being very optimistic.
You could add Trent Rivers as well to one we've brought in.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Skilled.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you thank you very much. It's time. That was a fantastic call. Call back another week. That'd be great.
Okay. Great. Appreciate your work, guys.
Thanks, mate. That was It's Time, Demonland poster. Thank you for that call. We might move on to AFLW because we had a fantastic win on the weekend. It was a great game out at the windy city of Casey. And I bet you Fremantle weren't expecting to play in conditions such as that, and we played those conditions a lot better than they did. We were able to score in both the quarters where we were going against the wind, and they weren't able to kick a goal into the wind, and that was the difference in the end. We were fantastic, George. You're our AFLW correspondent, and I know the other two guys are very on the ball with the AFLW. So, but George,
we're bringing them online, and with a lot of supporters now, particularly now that we're getting, as a club, the success in those areas. You would have thought that the Fremantle side of all the sides would know about the Fremantle doctor, but they obviously didn't in this game. I think we held them to 2 points in the first quarter, and effectively that was the game all over. That meant that we were able to kick with the wind, and took good advantage of it when we had the wind, particularly in the last quarter. I don't know that the ball actually went down the Freo end in the to any notable extent. I think the trouble was we could only kick one goal. What was it? 1 goal 7 or something like that. Could have really put the whole thing well beyond any hope for early on, but we couldn't. It was almost like a repeat of the last couple of weeks. We've beaten these serious sides in the competition, and we've beat them by sheer determination. It's been a slog in certain parts of the game, and the girls have really stood up. The resilience that we talk about that we've been looking for in the men's side in years gone by. Well, we've seen it in the girls in these last 4 games certainly. Hanks and Paxman continue to impress, remarkably. McNamara is another addition to the side, and the old reliables like Maddie Gay and Shelley Scott and now Eden Zanker are just they're just turning up every game and doing exactly what you need to see them do. They've just been fantastic. I also like Lauren McGee, or Specky McGee as she's known. This was her third or fourth AFL game in total, and we were worried when Sinead Goldrick went down that we weren't going to get the that sort of defensive mindset. But boy, these Irish girls, when they get the ball, there's no stopping them. It's just run straight ahead, and who cares who's in front of them? They just barrel through. It's fantastic to watch. Yeah, we should be pretty hopeful against Adelaide. We've already beaten them in recent couple of games ago. However, it's at the Adelaide Oval, and it's in front of, no doubt, it'll probably be a pretty sizable crowd because there's nothing else to do in Adelaide at this time of year or any other time of the year. So the locals will turn up, hopeful again. But so Adelaide are a formidable side in their own right. Let's not take that away from them. But we're in great form. The question will be, can we put Daisy into the side? Is she well enough after the medial strain, or do we just hang off until we get through to the grand final to bring her out again? But we'll look forward to the game this weekend.
She was wearing a pretty sizable brace.
Yeah, it was good. It was a good size. Sorry,
I was just going to say there was footage of her training tonight at Gosh's, or at least kicking. And although she had strapping on the knee, it didn't look like it had as much work as. She certainly didn't have the moon boot on anymore. So maybe that's a good sign. Cheers also to the four Ds who made the All-Australian squad, I think it is at this stage. So that's Paxman, Lauren Pearce, Kate Hoare and Tyler Hanks. And you've got to say that Eden Zanker was probably pretty stiff to miss, I would have thought. So yeah, well done to those girls. And
I think Paxman has made it every season of the AFLW competition.
She's
so
superstar
fantastic.
quality, absolute superstar.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think she's had 20 possessions this week, 5 tackles. Gay has had 19 touches, 9 tackles. Just fantastic. Lily Mithen, is just ferocious whenever she goes near the footy. Shelley Scott kicking those 2 goals. And as you mentioned, Zanka and Lauren Pearce as well in the ruck has just been, fantastic. Loving it and really enjoying watching our women play. Yeah,
I was reflecting on what Grapevine said a couple of weeks back. Just the joy that it's just fantastic to see how much they're loving it, but also the camaraderie that Grapevine mentioned. It's so evident, isn't it? Just even watching Pearce on the boundary line at the end, and sort of her interactions with her teammates, and just really sort of. It makes me enjoy the sort of sport more, and in some respects, just and also a reminder that of course they're playing an elite level, and look at Paxman, she steeled herself for that game. You could just see, and when watching her sort of her approach, it was a reminder that they're at the elite level and that they're serious about the game. Not sort of suggesting that I thought they weren't, but just that sort of collective joy and the great energy there is in that team. A couple of thoughts. Just Paxman was just awesome, as I said. She just clearly wanted to win. I thought Gay, she's just total class footballer and just a natural footballer. But big props for Cunningham. I thought Cunningham was really important, particularly in that first quarter. She hasn't been terrific this season, struggled a bit up forward. I thought good move to bring her into the ruck, so another good move from the Stenier. But I thought her effort, like in that first quarter, her sort of effort around the ground to get to contest, not so much a skill, but just a sort of energy and effort was really important because we were against the wind in that first quarter. And I think that's really set up the victory for us. We scored 2 goals, was it, against the wind?
Just the one,
Just
I think.
the one, and I think that was...
Yeah, Bannon.
That really took the wind out of Frio's sails, and they looked nervous. And just on the conditions, I was thinking during the game, they can't be playing a final out there. I mean, that was ridiculous. Like, the conditions are hopeless. That's not allowing the women's game to sort of. That's not an elite environment to play a proper game of footy out there with the wind. I know the VFL have to, but I don't think it's a good look for the game. It's not helpful. It's really, the wind impacts the women's game much more than the men's game. And for that reason, I'm super pleased that the final next week's at Adelaide Oval, because it's on a proper ground that's protected from the wind. It'll suit us down to the ground. As long as it's not wet, you'll get a great game of footy. And now, we've got, I think, the most skilled side in the women's at the AFLW. So I'm really pleased that it's over there. And I think next season they should make sure that all finals are played at a proper AFL standard ground.
What do you think? Do you think they should play at Princes Park or Icon Park?
Or even at Docklands,
Yeah, that might be an issue, just with clashes to, I guess, to the AFL season. But I guess there can be workarounds to that they don't play on that every
they
day
can put
of
a man on the moon,
weekend.
Andy.
Yeah, that's true. Well, some people debate that. Yeah, fantastic. Anything else to add, Grapevining?
Did you get your tape work? Your VHS tape
No, I
working?
was on Watch Live this week, so no issues with the Foxtel, thankfully.
Well, I actually did have an issue. I was watching on KO. I was up in the Mornington Peninsula, and I had spotty internet where I was, and it actually cut out with a few minutes to go. So I almost, and by the time I got it working again, the siren had gone. So and we kicked a goal right at the end. So missed that one, but that's technology for you. Well, let's move on to our Geelong game. Changes for this week. Do we change a winning lineup? We've got no injuries. It doesn't appear we're going to get back the two forwards that they've said they're going to play for Casey this week. Does Casey have a game this week, George? Are Casey back?
No, the Casey have got a game on the 10th of April, I think.
Williamstown, I think.
I think it might be again. Williamstown, yeah, that's correct, yeah. And I think that's going to be the difficulty for the senior side, that we didn't have a game this week, and people like Chandler and Melcham, who were the subs in the last couple of weeks, they apart from training, they really haven't had any opportunity to get any match practice in. So it's going to be difficult, I think, to change a winning structure from that point of view alone, unless there are those niggling little injuries that we don't know about or ever hear about to an individual. So it'll be very hard to swap anyone around. Not so much as I don't think anybody would warrant removal, but the question is, can you afford to put someone in who really hasn't had the opportunity to show their wares, I suppose?
We had Melksham as the sub. I think that I don't know. What do you think of that move? Bringing in someone like Melksham could be an impact player. I know he hasn't played much this year, but we know what he can do.
I think Melcham's biggest problem is actually what the others are doing. That we're number one for inside 50 tackles, 17 tackles inside 50 this week, and I think Melcham had 6 for the whole season last year. So he's not the sort of person you want to be putting in there at the expense of, let's say, a Spargo, who's been doing his job fantastically, but from that perspective. So yeah, I'd be very reticent about bringing him in just from that.
Although one of the
alone.
AFL apps showed that this is Melksham I'm talking about, had a top speed of 99.9 kilometres an hour. So he's got the pace that we require. Just a matter of whether he can apply it defensively.
I saw that. I wonder where that glitch occurred. Yeah, that was a funny one. B-Man changes this week. We're going to wield the axe.
Yeah, to No, I wouldn't have thought. I mean, again, as I said last week, sort of winning teams are. Yeah, it's pretty tough to change winning team. I mean, the question mark would be, it's Andy. You keep getting this wrong. It's Sparrow, not Swallow. People have suggested that Melksham might come in for Sparrow again. I think that you don't quite know what Sparrow's role is fully, but you'd expect that it's forward pressure and tackling and ability to swing through the midfield when required. And unlike Dermy, I loved his
Oh, yeah, let's talk about
test
that. You
when
I know
Jordan
you.
got a clip across the neck for, of all people, Dermot Brereton suggesting that
Mhm.
Sparrow was out of line. Give me a break. That's exactly what I want from Melbourne players. Not of course to do anything stupid, get reported, and not. But he didn't, did he? He came in and remonstrated and made the point that you don't clip one of our players, and not So I really like. I've actually sort of like the way he plays. I think we talked about a couple of weeks ago how clever he is. Again, another player with high footy IQ. So I can't see Melksham coming in for him. The player that maybe is Jeddah, Hibbard coming in for Jeddah. But Hibbard's not great one-on-one. And, I think Jeddah, no knock on getting beaten by Green. Green's a legitimate superstar, isn't he? So, that would be probably the only one that I think might be on the card. Jeddah comes out, Hibbard comes in. And you could put a case together for Melksham because he is such a talented player. So, you're travelling pretty well when you've got one of your nominally top 15 players, arguably, top 10 maybe, not being able to get in the team, but that's a good sign.
I think we also have to look at the way Geelong played, and they showed it yet again in the Hawthorn game this week. They play the old rope-a-dope game. Chip the ball around, move it really slowly up the ground, and eventually they'll kick it long, hoping for Hawkins to get the ball in some way up forward. But we saw it badly from our perspective last year. We just didn't get to the ball to the next kicker. And so you need the Spargos and you need the ANBs and you need the Kozzys and you need the Hunts to be able to get across and stop that chain of kicks coming down the ground. So I don't think that we can afford to bring in people who aren't prepared to chase for the whole game, to stop their whole game plan. I think it's going to be even more critical. Geelong haven't got a great forward line, if the truth be known. It's Hawkins and not much else. Rowan's not there. Dangerfield, who has moved down forward, he's not there as well. Brian Myers occasionally chips in, but hopefully we'll have. I think Jeddah would be able to play on him successfully. They're just and as proven in the game against Brisbane and the game against Hawthorn, those old legs at the end of the game are running out of steam in a big way. Hawthorn were not entitled to come back in that game. The game should have been over. Brisbane were not entitled to come back, but they did. I think we're starting to see the cliff that Geelong's about to fall over. Selwood's not being used in the middle all that much. He's only in there occasionally. We've got to find someone to shut down Guthrie in the middle. He's their go-to man at the moment. And without Dangerfield, I think we've got the opportunity. We've got a superior midfield in terms of talent at the moment. If we can stop Guthrie again, they've got very little else other than Duncan in the middle. So we're far better placed than perhaps what we think, and so I wouldn't be making any changes this week.
Jeremy Cameron, not sure what his availability is according to the injury list listed on the AFL website. Mitch Cleary has said Cameron is pushing to play, but appears, given the dialogue out of the Cats, he may have to wait at least one more week to make his Geelong debut.
Yeah, he was 2 to 3 weeks last week.
He's listed as test now, so I don't know if that's just Geelong sort of playing funny buggers. But I certainly wouldn't want to come up against both Cameron and Hawkins. But
and Radikalia. I don't know what's going on there. That's another big unknown at the moment.
He's listed as fractured leg TBC, so I don't think he'll be coming back.
Yeah.
Good name for a band,
And
not
there's
for an
another
injury.
one. Sorry, what was that,
Good
big
name
man?
for a band, but not for an injury. Fractured leg, TBC.
Big man, tactically, how do you see this game going?
When we played them last year, as George said, that was one of the most painful games of football that I can ever recall. If you'll remember, that's where Scott just went in the keepings off the whole game. That's I didn't see any of the Hawthorn game except the last 5-6 minutes, which was exciting enough. But by all accounts, it was a dirge before that because Geelong were and Hawthorn were both playing that sort of 2020 style footy as far as I understand. This game when they played that game last year, I backed the Cats the following week under the total match point, thinking they were going to do the same. And Scott did completely the opposite. He came out and attacked the following week, and that was their highest score, I think, for the season that next week. So, I think he likes playing funny buggers tactically, Scott. So I reckon either way, they're going to struggle to beat us because Dangerfield's a huge, huge player, obviously, to have out. But Rowan's a really important player to have out for us because it's I'm more worried about a Toby Green than a Hawkins because May is the perfect matchup for Hawkins. He's not, he's strong enough to take Hawkins. He's quick enough to go with him on the lead. Rowan's the sort of size player that we struggle with. We don't really have a great matchup for that sort of medium sort of player. So he's out's a big one, I reckon, for us. And I just think that if they go slow, the problem is exactly like the Hawks game. They play that slow game or they don't score enough in the long now half-hour things. They don't put a margin on on their opposition. They don't get any benefit really from. They don't get the 5-6 goals up that they might have been against Hawthorn if they dominated. So they keep oppositions in the match, which is a problem. But I think that structurally, as we've talked about, as It's Time pointed out, our system is better this year in terms of rebounding, and so even when they're coming in, we've that's been their strength for ages, is how strong they are defensively, and they rebound off that halfback flank. Well, that's what we're doing this year. We're intercepting more than they are. So I think we're much better positioned to score from their style. They're going to struggle to score against us. So I just can't see them scoring enough to beat us. The planets have aligned, and I think that we have showed maturity this year. So I expect us to win this game, and remarkably, they're favourite. I think I might be wrong on that, but in the betting, I've got a feeling that they might be favourite. And if that's the case, money for old rope on that one. So I think that sets up super well for us, and I'd be surprised if we lost.
The thing is, for all the frustration, of last year's chip around game, they barely able to put a winning score on last year against us. So I think it might have been pulling our hair out, but I don't know whether it was all that effective, as Big Man's just pointed out.
Well, how much did they beat us by last? It was
a few points, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
We almost had a kick at the end to win the game.
And
weren't able to get it.
I have to say one thing. I don't know what it is, but I really dislike Geelong and Selwood. I just cannot stand the way he goes about his footy. So I'd be super pleased to see him, trudge off the ground, complaining about the umpires and looking up and seeing a 6-goal loss.
Yeah, he's even worse this year. He's got to that stage in his career where he's staging more and more to make up for his lack of running power that he used to have. And even in that Brisbane game, the goal that they got, their last goal came about because Selwood got the ball in the Brisbane back line and threw his head back as soon as he picked the ball up, and the umpire fell for it and then handed out a 50-metre penalty because the opposition complained about it. And he was doing exactly the same in the Hawthorn game. He's just such a frustrating player to watch at the moment because he's not playing football like he used to.
And as an indication, I was just looking now at the odds, and not suggesting that odds are necessarily all that sort of reflective, but they are generally. So they're definitely reflective of what the sort of outside world think. And Geelong are $1.73 favourite for this game, and I would have this marketed as being favourite for all the reasons we've talked about, and particularly with the players they've got out. So I think that just reflects that the rest of the footy community is still not trusting Melbourne, and maybe with good reason. And there's sort of past glories for Geelong, but I don't think they've been that impressive this season. And I fully agree, George. I reckon they're going to fall off the cliff. In fact, I don't think they'll make the 8 this season.
I've been waiting for them to fall off the cliff for a long time. They just sort of hang on and hang on. They always just seem to be able to entice players over and still just top up nicely, and they're able to just sort of pick these guys out of, never have a top 10 draft pick and still manage to pick some guys out who can do some damage. But let's hope that they can't run out the game, and our fitness sort of, with these longer quarters back again. I think Hawthorn sort of overran them in the end. I don't know what took a while for Hawthorn to get a rocket up their bum to get going at the end of this week. But Geelong sort of, I think, ran out of gas, and hopefully they can do the same this week against us.
Yeah.
All right, boys. I think we might leave it there. Did you anyone have trouble getting tickets this week? I thought it seemed much smoother for me for our home game this week than it was in the first round.
I found the perfect solution. I got a friend to get mine.
Oh well, that's good.
I found it easier this week too, and I ended up with seats that are almost identical to my normal home ground seats, so I'm very happy.
What's your normal seat, Grapevine?
Pretty much in the opposite pocket to where I saw you last week. So,
all right, you might see me this week because we've been put to the other side of the ground.
Right. And you're normally in the southern, are you? Okay, yeah. I prefer to be in the northern, so yeah, happy.
Oh, you mightn't if you have to hang around us too long.
I just prefer to be at the MCG and not having to play Geelong at Cardinia Park, which I think we do have to play them later in the season. So let's hope we can bank a win this time.
I'm going to get a COVID shot next Wednesday, and so I'm going to call the MCG and suggest that they just have the Ponsford stand only for vaccinated people.
They must be. I don't know, how far away do you think we are from the AFL? We're 30 plus odd days of no virus in Victoria. Are we going to 100% soon? Or,
the vaccine. I'm all for the vaccine membership / passport and vaccinated, I should say. So, we should have our choice of where we go. Actually,
I think I mentioned this last time that certainly after round one, my train home was at 100% capacity. So I don't see why the ground can't be the same.
Yeah, unfortunately, the state government, it's easy to impose restrictions. It's much harder to unimpose them, and but the reality is that it should be allowed at 100% capacity at the moment. There are no cases in the community. What are we doing this for? But that's across all sorts of industries at the moment. There's still restrictions in restaurants, and there's still restrictions in bars, and there's still restrictions at theatres and things like that, all unnecessary at the moment. That's 39 days without a single community transmission. There is no reason to keep it.
I just wonder what's going to happen if they do go to 100%, if they're going to still make us purchase tickets this way so they have some control over where people sit, or if they're going to let me sit in my reserve seat again. I don't know. Time will tell. All right, boys. Thank you very much. Thank you, George. Thank you, B-Man, and thank you, Grapevine. It's been a great chat. Thank you to It's Time as well, calling in. Good to have callers calling back in these times. very much, guys, and go
Go
D's.
Go Red Legs.
Come on,